You've developed business in over 70 countries, but when you first went to develop business overseas, how did you find it? Was it easier than you expected, or was it a bit harder than you expected?
I think it was a lot easier than I anticipated, Stuart. At, at the end of it all, whether you're doing domestic business or international business, people are always going to sum you up in a few seconds when you're sitting in front of them. Most importantly, they want to find out if they can trust you and whether or not the product that you have is credible, whether there are going to be benefits to them and the organization. But trust is important, and I think that part was the same across domestic as well as international business. But the international business was no different. I got immersed in South America, in Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, Chile. So it was probably for me a lot easier than being immersed into North America or Europe, for instance. And so that part, yeah, I can confidently say it was easier than I thought initially.
How has sales changed over the years, and how has it remained the same?
Good question. I think the actual selling process as such has not changed over the years, but the way in which people are selling things definitely has. Decades ago, there wasn't an internet, there wasn't the courier servicing available that we have nowadays. People sell things differently. You had to do a lot more actual sales calls. You used brochures. You used postal drops. You used to call people up. I mean, they had call centers back then as well, but it was a lot less sophisticated in the olden days versus today. But one thing that has stayed the same is the level of trust that is required to do business. And so, yeah, a lot of positive changes over the years, a lot of negative ones, in fact, because so often the selling process nowadays has become a little more impersonal, if we could call it that. People in a lot of companies prefer e-commerce as opposed to face-to-face business, but it also depends on what kind of product it is that you're selling. The more complicated the product, the more people are likely to want to see you face to face. If it's just a basic commodity, there's no point really in face to face. You can actually schedule that down to quite infrequently if you're selling commodities. But other products that are complicated, you do need that face to face time.
So tell us a little bit more about how things have changed for you in the last couple of months. We had you on the channel over a year ago now. You've started a business called Macademy. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, a lot has changed since we last spoke, Stuart. I have become self employed, have a company called Macademy now. And the name originated actually from your brother. He was instrumental in developing this name, Macademy, and your mother. The surname being Macadam, and if you learn or train somebody, there's an academy involved. So it's a good combination, Macadam, Academy, and my business being called Macademy. It's good to be self-employed. I'm enjoying the challenge. I've always wanted to do it, but sometimes you get comfortable in the corporate world and things happen slowly. But in the last 12 months, they've actually happened quite rapidly and very positive, in fact.
What are some of the key services that you offer at Macademy?
We focus on four main areas, Stuart. The most important area is business development. We also focus on sharpening selling skills. A big part of the focus is on sales strategy and also business negotiation. So those are the four main areas we train and consult in.
And how are those skills delivered to people that are interested in it? Do you do it through online mentoring and consulting? Do you do workshops? Do you do something else altogether? Presentations, seminars?
A combination of all of those. There is the consulting part. Some people would just like to have a few hours of one-on-one consulting, and that's fine. We can do that on any of those topics I've already mentioned. Then we also do a half-day workshop on a topic of their choice. The half-day workshops are generally more of an overview of the topic with a quiz and a little bit of breakout time, for people to consolidate information that they've been trained in. Then there's a one-day workshop which goes into a little more depth than the consulting part. There's a two-day workshop, and then there's also a 3-day and a 4-day workshop. 4 days is generally sufficient to cover most topics. If some people do require 5 days, we can do that, and that will involve quite a lot of in-depth training and practical application during the breakout times.
One thing which you've got a lot of experience in is international business development and developing business from nothing. Can you walk us through a little bit more about that process and how you've gone from taking ideas in people's heads and turning them into multi-million dollar operations and business arms?
Yes, business development is one of my favorite things in life. I've always enjoyed developing something from nothing. Sometimes a lot of companies have products, they have ideas, and they have strategies that are quite effective in certain markets, be that domestic or one or two other countries. But I think when you have a big idea about something that has a lot of potential, there's a huge amount of scoping and research that needs to be done to see if what you have is a good idea, whether it can be implemented, and whether or not it's going to make money and be feasible. And yeah, when I think back about the ingredients business and the dairy industry, when I was part of that, there were a lot of good ideas back then, and companies were always looking for opportunities. But most importantly, you need to do your homework before you get involved in launching any new type of product. It doesn't matter how many good benefits there might be. If you don't do your homework, it's going to cost you dearly potentially. So, yeah, one of my favorite things to do is to develop business, but I'm always mindful of the time it does take to research what you're wanting to launch or what you're wanting to do. And that's where, marketing research comes in. Some travel is effective sometimes when you need to meet people that are involved in businesses that you want to target, and just to get ideas from these people as to what their thoughts are on a new supplier or new potential supplier.
So, a lot of the international business development does require travel to go and see the people in person and shake their hand and discuss the proposal which you have for them and the products which you are wanting to sell. Can you walk us through the preparation that you would normally do when going to a meeting with these particular people?
Yes. Look, I'm a big proponent of face-to-face time. I think when you meet people face to face, it's a different setup and a different scenario. You look across a table, you look into their eyes, and I think you build up a trust and credibility that is harder to do if you did it telephonically or by email or whatever other means you want to use. So, if you're wanting to launch an ingredient into a particular market, if it's a unique ingredient, it's different. People are always going to be a lot more interested. But if it's maybe a generic type of product, another Me Too type of ingredient, you really have to case the market out, scope it well, strategize as to who your customers or potential customers could be, but you need to gauge their interest in changing from their current suppliers. It's important to meet the right people. I know sometimes you have to meet other people to direct you to the right people, but you need to figure out fairly quickly who the decision makers are in business. And I think when it comes to certain products, you may need to meet with technical people, R&D type of people, scientists. You might need to meet with the chief honcho or chief executive or senior management team of a company to assess whether or not there's potential to do business. So all of these things need to be taken into account when you're trying to develop new business for a product. And it doesn't matter if that product is an existing one or a Me Too one or something totally unique and different. You still have to go through the same process. It's never easy to develop new business. It's a lot easier, in my opinion, to sell something than it is to develop new business for something because it's a different way of doing things. Selling is relatively easy at the right price point, but developing business is a completely different ball game. You know, if you don't have customers yet, how do you develop them? Where do you develop them? What do you need to do to develop business? It's hugely important that you do your homework. And this homework could stretch, Stuart, from 1 month through 12 months. And business I've done in Japan in the past, it can take up to 2 years to develop a business from the first time that you meet with a potential customer. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of water that flows under the bridge before meeting that first time and actually loading a container.
One of your website blog articles talks about selling versus telling. What's the difference between the two, and why do salespeople often get it wrong when it comes to selling versus telling?
This is an age-old conundrum, Stuart. Salespeople are quite sociable. They are extroverted people mainly, and they like to talk and babble. When you meet with a customer, you have limited time to get your message across. People are busy nowadays. There's a lot of stuff going on in organizations, and when they give you the courtesy of their time, you need to be mindful of the limited time that you have and be respectful of their time. So don't ever babble in meetings. I get the part where you have to break the ice. That's critically important. You do need to build a relationship with the person that you are trying to sell to. You're not just building a relationship with that person or that company, but what you're building is mainly trust. That person sitting across the table from you, eyeballing you, has got something at the back of their head which says, can I trust this person? Once that trust is established, you need to be brief in what you convey to people, and you give them as much or as little as they want in the time that you have available. But you have a lot of other time after the meeting to follow up, to make calls, to send emails, and to communicate, and possibly have another meeting or a few more meetings before they're convinced to buy whatever it is you're trying to sell. But building trust is critically important. If somebody doesn't trust you, it's quite simple. They're not going to buy from you. So when you meet people for the first time, look professional, act professional, speak professionally, get your message across, understand what they want, what their company is about. There's a lot of homework that needs to be done before you actually sell a product. And in the limited time people have available nowadays, you have to use that time as best you can. And you need to be respectful of people's time. So babbling And telling instead of selling is very common. And that's where Macademy actually comes in. We try and redirect the way selling gets done.
I think a big part of that as well, which I've got here in my notes, is that aspect of getting commitment from people when you are doing the selling. Because I think if you're doing a lot of telling, very rarely do you get the chance to actually get commitment from someone, because all you're doing is
Hmm.
communicating, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But ultimately, you need to get that commitment so you can make the sale. And I think that's something which very often needs to just be done through subtle ways, which can get a person on board with what you're presenting if they are interested in things such as saying, is this something that you'd be interested in? Are you happy to move forward with this? Can we get an order in and get it done by the end of the week? Like those sorts of small, subtle things, as opposed to just telling them about all the great things about the product and the company that you're a part of as well.
Yeah, spot on, Stuart. If you're selling something that's a generic type of product, a Me Too ingredient or Me Too product, it's quite likely that the person you're selling to already knows everything about that product. If it's a new novel product or something quite technical, there'll be a lot more interest in the product, and the attention to detail will be a lot more focused than if it's a generic product, for instance. But ultimately, like I said previously, you've got limited time to convey your message. You need to understand things from the customer's perspective. They want to know what it is that you have to sell. Secondly, they want to know what are the benefits to me and my organization if I change suppliers. If they don't know you as a company, it's very difficult sometimes to change a buyer's outlook on suppliers. It's very difficult to actually get buy-in from them in that first meeting as to whether or not they're going to change suppliers. Generally, from my experience, buyers don't change suppliers easily, and certainly not in the first meeting you have with them. They are going to have to trust you a lot more before they make that commitment. So do your homework properly about the company you're potentially wanting to do business with. Convey your message professionally and ask questions, and the questions you need to ask are you willing to change suppliers? If the answer is, well, it might be difficult to change suppliers, we're happy with what we've got, what is it that you can incentivize me with to change my mind? So give them those benefits. And once you've given them the benefits, keep asking for commitment, you know. So now that you've heard all of what I've told you, could you give us a chance? What are your thoughts on changing suppliers? Perhaps we don't need all your business, but can we have some of your business? Don't ever leave a meeting without gaining some commitment. The commitment might even be just having a follow up meeting or a follow up telephone call. But every meeting you do with a customer, get some more commitment. And eventually you'll get all the commitment, and the customer will say, where must I sign? Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about sales versus business development. What are the differences between the two, and how are the two interlinked?
Good question. I think a lot of companies actually see the two as synonymous, and that's a huge mistake. When you develop business, you're actually more of an artist, I believe, because you're creating something from nothing potentially. And there's a lot more work involved in developing business versus just plain selling. Plain selling involves a different set of skills and techniques and tactics versus business development. So when you develop business, you need to scope a market, You need to understand everything about the product you're selling. You need to understand who the competitors might be out in the marketplace that you're selling into. You need to understand your strengths, your weaknesses. You need to understand opportunities. And of course, you need to understand all the threats out there potentially for the product it is that you're selling. Then you need to get yourself in front of key decision makers and the right people. You need to be able to convey a message succinctly about what it is you're selling. When I say succinctly, time is of the essence when you develop business. You can't be wasting people's time. If something is a Me Too type of product, generic product, buyers will give you some time, but they're more interested in benefits. If it's a unique type of product that's, you know, not launched or not available in a particular market, you'll get a lot more time and people will be a lot more interested than what they are in generic types of commodity products. Selling is completely different. Selling involves a lot of psychology. You need to sum people up. You need to assess a situation. You need to throw things out there and gauge the response. Of course, salespeople would like, excellent pricing, but there's a skill in getting a certain level of pricing. I think anybody can sell at a certain price point. I mean, that's logical. If something is dirt cheap, it's quite easy to sell. But when it's not cheap, that's where the skill comes in. So, as you can see, a lot of differences. The overlapping part is probably in types of customer that you would target. I think salespeople also have to target a certain customer base. And there are a few other pointers that are quite similar, Stuart, where there is overlapping. But by and large, they're distinctly different, when it comes to business.
When it comes to negotiation and selling, what are the common mistakes salespeople make, and what are some of the ways in which that can be addressed?
Excellent question. I think when you're negotiating with a customer and they're ready to buy, they've given you all the signals that they're committed to do what you're wanting them to do, to buy your product. However, it's amazing to see how often at that point, salespeople or sales managers are willing to give people more than what they're actually wanting. I mean, it's common knowledge that everybody wants a good deal. Every buyer, procurement manager, every customer wants a good deal. But sometimes there's a lot of skill in perhaps pushing up the pricing and getting them to accept that. So when they are prepared to do that, it's no good to actually start discounting or giving more incentive to buy the product. They've already committed. So just simply close the deal. And this is where people and salespeople in particular make a lot of mistakes, is they affect the bottom line by giving people more discount or more incentives than what they've already agreed to pay for something. There's no need for that. So when you give somebody something, you need to expect something in return. It's a different story if you do negotiate a deal with a customer and you want continuity. I think most salespeople want continuity. You don't just want a one-off sale unless it's a second-hand car or something like that you're selling. But if it's a product that you're selling where you want continuity, that's a different matter. You can then negotiate something uh, for a long-term deal or one-year deal or whatever it is that you're negotiating. But make sure that you trade some variables when you do that. Get something in return. Never just offer something where you get nothing in return.
When it comes to sales and business development, how can mastering those two things give business owners a competitive advantage over the people that they're doing business against every single day?
Out in the marketplace, there are a lot of different mindsets. You know, when you have good assets, and when I say assets, I mean business development people, managers, or sales people, or sales managers, customer service people. You need to invest in these people, and you need to invest in their skills base most of all. And in each of those facets, whether it's developing business or sales skills, you need to invest heavily in those, because the market out there is extremely competitive. And a lot of very skilled salespeople and business development people are out there selling their products. If you're up against them with a generic type of product or a Me Too product, you're going to have to really hone in on teaching people skills. And if you don't do that and you don't make that investment, you're going to pay a very dear price. It's different if you have a more technical product or something unique, because people will give you a lot more airtime and availability to listen to your story, and there's a strong likelihood they will buy it from you ultimately. But you still need people to know their stuff. And I can't keep harping on this subject enough. You know, train people and make sure they're up to speed with their business development skills and sales or selling skills. Because if you don't, there are many other companies out there that are investing in their staff. So for business owners, for senior managers, owners of companies, my message is very clear. Invest in your assets. And whether those assets are salespeople or business development people or customer service people, don't hold back. I can't overemphasize that. It's important that they know what they're doing, that they're confident in what they're doing, and that they're going to deliver the results that ultimately will affect a business's bottom line.
All right. And if people want to engage in your services with Macademy, how can they get in touch with you?
www.developmorebusiness.com. You can contact me by email at info@developmorebusiness.com, or you can give me a call on 021 357 784, and that's a New Zealand number. So either of those ways would be helpful, and it will only be a pleasure to assess your needs, assess what it is that you're wanting to do, develop business, negotiate better, sharpen selling skills, develop a sales strategy. I mean, those are all key areas that we focus on. And with the decades of experience that I have, I'm sure we can equip you with those skills to improve your business and to make things happen for your company.
Magical. We'll call it a day there, Peter Macadam. Thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you.
back on for round two.
Good to talk to you again, Stuart. Look forward to more chats in the future.